Idaho, October 1944. A guard put 2 fingers between the iron cuff and Klara Weiss's wrist, not to comfort her, but to check whether the metal was still tight enough. It was. She was 22 years old, a weather room typist from Hamburg. She had crossed the Atlantic inside a transport ship that smelled of fuel, vomit, salt, and fear. For 19 days, her right wrist had been locked to another woman's left wrist. Her left wrist had been locked to a chain that ran through 6 more prisoners. Every time one of them slept, everyone else learned the shape of her exhaustion. Every time one of them stumbled, the whole line paid for it. And on that cold Idaho morning, standing outside a wooden army processing shed, with frost still caught in the beet fields beyond the fence, Klara made herself a promise so small, she did not know whether it counted as courage. She would not beg. Not in German, not in English, not with her eyes. She did not know that before the sun was fully above the irrigation ditch, a 61-year-old farmer named Samuel Pike would look at the irons on her wrists and refuse to take a single step farther. She did not know he would turn to the army captain beside him and say 7 words that would stay with her longer than the war. "No iron goes into my fields." The captain thought Pike was being difficult. The guards thought he was making a sentimental point he could not afford. Klara thought she had misunderstood the translation. But Samuel Pike was not sentimental. He had spent 40 years pulling potatoes, beets, alfalfa, and milk out of land that gave nothing unless it was asked correctly. He knew the difference between caution and waste. He knew what broke a tool. He knew what injured a hand. And when he looked at a line of chained women expected to work around wagons, blades, ditch gates, horses, and frozen mud, he did not see security. He saw stupidity dressed in uniform. The prisoners had been brought to Camp Burley because the army had run out of easy answers. By the autumn of 1944, farms across the interior West were short of workers in a way that no patriotic poster could fix. The sons were overseas. The hired men had gone into shipyards, bomber plants, or infantry uniforms. Crops did not care why no one came. Beets still had to be topped. Potatoes still had to be dug. Hay still had to be stacked before weather turned it useless. The War Food Administration could count the shortage on paper. The farmers could count it in fields left half finished. Inside the wire, German prisoners sat under guard, fed at government expense, restless, angry, frightened, and physically able. International law allowed non-military labor under strict rules. Pay had to be recorded. Housing had to meet standard. Work could not be dangerous by design. Abuse was forbidden. That sounded orderly in Washington. It was less orderly in Idaho, where a sugar beet harvest could be lost to one hard freeze, and where nobody at the first briefing had decided what to do with female enemy personnel. There were only 28 women in Klara's section. They had been clerks, radio assistants, nurses' aides, cooks, couriers, and office workers attached to military units that collapsed in France. The army did not know what category to place them in. So the army did what institutions often do when a person does not fit a category. It made the category tighter. The irons had gone on in New York. They stayed on through the rail journey west. They stayed on through the first night at camp. They stayed on when the first labor detail was assembled before dawn, because the form said external work details required restraints unless otherwise authorized. Samuel Pike had not seen the form. He had seen the wrists. That was enough. Captain Harold Mercer stood with his clipboard under one arm, explaining procedure through a German-speaking sergeant from Milwaukee. Pike listened without interrupting. He He let Mercer finish the sentence about enemy personnel. He let him finish the sentence about escape risk. He even let him finish the sentence about public confidence. Then Pike took off his hat, wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve in the cold morning, and said, "Captain, I asked you for workers. You brought me a chain." The sergeant translated. The women did not move. Pike pointed toward the beet fields beyond the camp road. "I have knives out there. I have wagons. I have ditch boards slick with frost. I have horses that spook if a sack falls wrong. If one woman falls while she's tied to 5 others, I don't have labor. I have broken bones." Mercer said the restraints were standard. Pike said the field was not. Mercer said these women had served the enemy. Pike looked at the row of prisoners again. Klara felt his eyes reach her and stop, not on the uniform scraps, not on the numbers, not on the cuffs, but on her face. "I don't care what they serve before breakfast," Pike said. "On my place, they work with their hands, so their hands will be their own." The captain frowned. Pike put his hat back on. "No iron goes into my fields." It was not a speech. That was why it worked. It had no decoration, no kindness performed for an audience, no sermon about mercy. It sounded like a rule about machinery, weather, gates, and harvest. But the ground shifted under the room anyway. Mercer had pressure from above. Pike had pressure from the fields. The camp needed the farmers more than the farmers needed the camp's pride. And after 10 minutes of clipped conversation, a guard stepped forward with the keys. The first cuff opened on Lotta Brenner's wrist, then on Anna Vogt's, then on Klara's. The chain hit the floor with a sound that was not loud, but it entered Klara's bones like thunder. For 19 days, every movement of her arm had ended in another person's weight. Now she lifted her hand and found only air. Her wrist was ringed in purple and yellow. The skin beneath the cuff had broken in 2 places, healed badly, and opened again. A thin half-moon of blood moved where the metal had been. She stared at it as if it belonged to someone else. Beside her, Anna pressed both hands to her chest and took one deep breath, then another, as though her lungs had been chained too and were only now learning the distance. Pike watched long enough to make sure the irons were off. Then he turned away. That was the first thing Klara noticed about him. He did not linger to admire his own decency. They rode to Pike Farm in the back of a military truck with 2 guards in the cab and no chains on the floor. The road ran between beet fields cut into dark squares by irrigation ditches. Beyond them, low barns sat close to the earth. Farther out, snow was already holding on the shoulders of the mountains. Klara had grown up with harbor fog, brick streets, wire rooms, and the constant tick of messages being sent by men who never saw the faces at the other end. Idaho seemed too large to be real. The sky did not hang over the land. It exposed it. Pike Farm was not pretty. It was useful. That mattered more. There was a white house with a sagging porch, a machine shed with patched tin, a dairy barn dark with heat and breath, a root cellar dug into the slope, and 3 miles of ditches that fed the fields whenever water was available and stole the crop whenever it was not. Samuel's wife, Ruth Pike, stood at the back door in a brown wool dress and a gray apron, watching the prisoners climb down. She did not smile. She did not glare. She simply counted them the way a woman counts plates before a meal and work before weather. The foreman was Samuel's oldest daughter, Miriam. That surprised the guards more than the prisoners. Miriam Pike was 34, tall, sharp-shouldered and sun-browned, with a braid pinned under a felt hat, and the kind of voice that made hired men move before they had decided whether they agreed. Samuel's 2 sons were gone. One was in Italy, one was buried in the Pacific, though nobody said that in the yard. Miriam ran the beet crew because grief had not made the crop lighter. She assigned the women by ability, not by rank. 2 went to the dairy, 4 to beet topping, 3 to potato sorting, 3 to ditch work. Klara heard ditch and thought she had drawn the worst place. She was wrong. The ditch was the heart of the farm. Water came from a lateral canal controlled by wooden gates, canvas dams, rusting headboards, hand-dug channels, and human attention. Too little water, the beets hardened. Too much, the ground drowned. A weak bank could collapse and take a day with it. A frozen gate could starve 2 acres before anyone noticed. Klara understood almost none of the words Miriam used, but she understood systems. She had spent 2 years copying weather reports, pressure changes, wind directions, and coded routing tables. She knew that small numbers became large consequences when nobody respected them. So when Miriam showed her how to read the flow by the color of the water, how to hear gravel moving under a board, how to see a leak by the shine of mud at the edge of a row, Klara listened with the exact attention she had once given radio traffic. By noon, her skirt was black with mud to the knee. By mid-afternoon, her hands were blistered under gloves too large for her fingers. By sundown, she could no longer feel the place where the cuffs had been. For the first time, that frightened her. Ruth Pike brought lunch on the first day in a crate lined with towels. There was bread, boiled eggs, hard cheese, apples, and coffee diluted with chicory. She handed the food to each woman, not to the guard, not to the interpreter, to each woman. Klara had not realized there were different ways to receive bread. Bread thrown toward you made you quick. Bread counted out made you small. Bread placed into your hands made you responsible for the act of holding it. Anna began to cry before she had taken a bite. She turned away so the guards would not see. Ruth pretended not to notice, which was the first kindness. Then she poured coffee into Anna's cup before it emptied, which was the second. That afternoon, Klara worked until her back burned. When she lifted a ditch board wrong and nearly dropped it on her foot, Miriam caught the edge and swore in English so sharp that meaning did not require translation. Then Miriam showed her again. Not gently, correctly. That mattered too. Over the next 6 weeks, the farm changed the women by repetition. Not all at once, not cleanly. Lotte, who had kept ration ledgers in a Luftwaffe office, became fast at sorting potatoes by feel in near darkness inside the cellar. Anna, who was 5 months pregnant and terrified that the camp doctor would take work away from her, learned to mend harness leather at the kitchen table because Ruth refused to let her stand in the cold longer than necessary. Greta, who had been an army nurse's aide, took over the dairy barn's evening washdown with a precision that made Miriam stop checking behind her after the first week. And Klara became the ditch woman. That was what Pike called her. Not the German, not the prisoner, the ditch woman. She learned to measure water by footsteps and seconds. She learned which gate stuck at the hinge, which field stole water at the corner, which bank looked solid until a boot sank through. She learned that Idaho mud had moods. She learned that cold water inside a boot could make a person reconsider every decision of her life. She learned that Miriam smiled only when no one was looking directly at her. And she learned that Samuel Pike never wasted words when a useful silence could do the work. One evening, after a week of hard wind, he found Klara kneeling by a headgate, touching the wet ground with 2 fingers. The interpreter had already climbed into the truck, so there was no easy way to talk. Pike crouched beside her. Klara pointed to the outer bank. The mud was too shiny. He looked. Then he stepped closer and drove his boot heel down. The bank gave way. Water burst through the weak spot and ran into the wrong row. Klara jumped back. Pike shoved a board into the break with both hands and yelled for Miriam. They patched it in 10 minutes. If the break had opened at night, 2 fields would have flooded before morning. Pike stood in the mud, breathing hard, staring at the bank. Then he looked at Klara and tapped 2 fingers to his eyes, then pointed at her. He did not know the German words. He did not need them. He had seen what she saw. From that day, he let her walk the ditch line ahead of the crew. The guards objected once. Pike asked whether they wanted to explain to Washington how a beet crop drowned while 2 armed men kept a woman from noticing water. They stopped objecting. The first trouble came from outside the farm. It came in a newspaper folded under Captain Mercer's arm. A farm in eastern Oregon had reported sabotage by German prisoners. A wagon axle cracked after being left exposed. Seed sacks had been cut. A gate had been opened. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Just the kind of small damage that ruins a season and proves every fearful man right. Within 48 hours, local pressure reached Camp Burley. Farmers who had been silent now spoke loudly. A county commissioner demanded stricter restraints. A pastor asked why enemy prisoners were being given American food, while American mothers read casualty telegrams. A mother whose son had died in France stood outside the camp gate and held a photograph until the guards could no longer meet her eyes. Mercer received orders to review all outside details. That meant Pike Farm. The review happened on a morning so cold the irrigation boards had to be kicked loose. Major Clayton Reeves arrived from the district office wearing polished boots that Idaho mud disliked immediately. He brought 2 clerks, 3 MPs, and a rulebook thick enough to make men feel safe. He watched the women unload from the truck. No chains. He watched Klara take a shovel without being told. No escort beside her. He watched Miriam point toward the west ditch, and watched Klara go before the interpreter had finished speaking. That was the part Reeves did not like. Too much independence, he told Captain Mercer. Samuel Pike stood beside them with both hands in his coat pockets. Too much winter, he said. Reeves looked at him. Pike looked at the fields. The major spent the morning writing down what he already believed. The prisoners moved too freely. The civilian workers spoke to them too casually. Ruth Pike served them the same stew as the farmhands. Miriam trusted one of them with water control. And Samuel Pike, who should have been grateful for temporary labor, behaved as though the army had borrowed his judgment and returned it damaged. At noon, Reeves announced that restraints would be restored during transport, and that field movement would require close guard presence until further review. The words passed through the interpreter. They reached the women like weather turning. Anna put one hand over her stomach. Loda looked at the ditch line, not at the soldiers. Klara looked at Samuel Pike. She expected anger. She saw calculation. Pike said, "Major, if you chain them, they don't work my farm." Reeves said the labor agreement could be reassigned. Pike nodded. "You can reassign paper. You can't reassign harvest. Not by Monday." Reeves told him not to mistake necessity for authority. Pike's voice dropped. "I never do." The argument might have ended the program on Pike Farm that day. Instead, the weather intervened. A hard gust came down from the north just after 2 o'clock. The temperature fell so quickly that breath thickened in front of faces. By 3, A thin skin of ice had formed along the shallow ditches. By 4, the west headgate jammed halfway open. At first, it looked manageable. Then water began running too fast through the upper channel and too slow to the lower rows. If the gate froze in that position overnight, the top field would drown under ice and the lower beet rows would go dry. Miriam saw it and shouted. Klara was already running. An MP stepped in front of her. Orders were orders. Klara tried to move around him. He raised a hand. She pointed toward the ditch, talking in German so fast the words broke against each other. The interpreter was 50 yards away. The water was moving now, cutting under the board. Miriam yelled, "Let her through!" The MP did not move. Major Reeves turned at the sound. Klara saw the calculation on his face, and for one terrible second she understood that a man could hesitate long enough to destroy a field and still call it procedure. Then Samuel Pike walked straight through the space between them, took the shovel from Klara's hand, and put it back into her hands on the other side of the MP. It was not a push, it was not a threat. It was a transfer of trust so visible that everyone saw it. "Go," he said. Klara went. What happened next lasted 12 minutes. Later, in reports, it would become a sequence of observations: flow rate, gate position, emergency bank cut, manual diversion, crop loss avoided. But for the people standing there, it was mud, wind, water, and a prisoner on her knees with both hands under a freezing board, reading the force of a ditch like it was a message sent in code. She shouted for sacks. Greta ran to the wagon and threw them down. Lotta dragged 2 boards from the shed. Miriam broke ice with the heel of her boot. Ruth came from the house with burlap and wire. Even one of the MPs grabbed a spade before he remembered he had not been ordered to. Klara had no English for what she needed, so she used her body. She pointed, cut her hand sideways, slapped mud, pushed one board lower, pulled another board out, and forced the water to choose a different path. The jammed headgate groaned, the top channel slowed, the lower rows began to shine. The field held. When it was over, Klara stood in ditch water up to her ankles, shaking so hard from cold that her teeth clicked. Major Reeves had mud on one polished boot. He stared at the gate, then at Klara, then at the women around her. Nothing in his rulebook had prepared him for the sight of enemy prisoners saving an American crop while armed guards watched. That night, Reeves did not restore the chains. He requested a formal evaluation instead. The difference looked small in writing. It was enormous in practice. The Army sent observers the following week: 2 from the district office, 1 from the judge advocate section, 1 agricultural specialist from Boise, 1 man from the War Food Administration who cared about tonnage more than ideology and wrote numbers so fast his pencil point broke twice. They came expecting to measure risk. They ended up measuring usefulness. Over 10 days, Pike Farm produced figures that irritated every person who wanted a simple answer. The beet crew topped and loaded 27% more acreage than a comparable civilian crew from the previous year. The potato cellar waste rate dropped by almost a third after Lotta reorganized the sorting bins. The dairy washdown took less time and passed inspection more cleanly after Greta changed the sequence. And the West Ditch, which had lost water every October for years, ran without a major leak because Klara walked it twice a day and noticed problems before they became events. The security incidents were recorded as 0. The injury incidents were recorded as 1. A guard slipped in the mud. Miriam said nothing. Everyone knew she wanted to. The report should have ended the argument. It did not. Good evidence rarely kills fear at once. Fear changes clothes. By December 1944, new orders were circulating among German prisoners across several camps. Some came through letters, some through whispered chains of command that survived captivity better than anyone expected. The message was simple: work slowly, do not help Americans, do not mistake fair treatment for friendship. Cooperation was betrayal. At Camp Burley, the order reached the women's barracks folded inside a piece of cigarette paper. Klara read it under a blanket after lights out. The barracks smelled of wool, damp shoes, boiled cabbage, and homesickness. Anna sat beside her, one hand resting on the child inside her. "What will you do?" Anna whispered. Klara folded the paper once, then again. "I am tired of being commanded by men who do not know where I am standing." She handed the paper to the little stove and watched the flame take it. Not everyone did the same. In January, at another farm north of the Snake River, 3 prisoners damaged equipment and denied it well enough that no one could prove anything until a harvest delay made the pattern obvious. The local papers did the rest. "Enemy labor endangers farms." The headline crossed desks faster than any crop report. Major Reeves was called to a district hearing. Captain Mercer brought Pike's evaluation. Samuel Pike was asked to attend as a civilian witness. Miriam went with him because, as she put it, men in offices sometimes needed a working translation of reality. Klara remained at the farm, but what happened in that room would decide whether she returned to the ditch line or spent the rest of the war behind wire. The hearing was held in a county courthouse that smelled of coal smoke and old varnish. A state senator asked Samuel Pike whether he trusted German prisoners. Pike said no. The room shifted. Then he continued, "I don't trust categories. I trust conduct. These women have worked my fields for 3 months. Their conduct has been better than some free men I've paid." A clerk asked whether he understood the security risk. Miriam answered before her father could. "We understand risk every morning. Frost is risk. Water is risk. A tired horse is risk. A knife in the hand of someone who hasn't eaten is risk. The question is not whether risk exists. The question is whether you know how to manage the real one." The agricultural specialist presented the numbers. 27% higher beet output, reduced waste, no escapes, no violence, no deliberate damage. 1 saved irrigation system. Then Captain Mercer read a line from Major Reeves's own evaluation. Reeves sat very still as his words entered the record. Restraints would have reduced, not increased, operational safety in this environment. That sentence did what Pike's anger could not. It turned decency into evidence. The district did not end the program. It standardized it. No automatic field chains, closer screening, clearer work assignments, civilian supervisors trained on Geneva Convention rules, daily accountability records, complaint channels that actually reach someone with authority. Within 6 weeks, the revised Idaho protocol was being copied in 4 other agricultural districts. By spring 1945, prisoner labor crews were working sugar beets, potatoes, dairy barns, and orchards across a wider area than anyone had expected in October. The work did not become easy. The politics did not become gentle. But the proof had changed the argument. The question was no longer whether humane treatment was soft. The question was why the harsh alternative had performed worse. Klara did not know any of this at first. She knew the ditch. She knew the shovel weight. She knew the ache in her shoulders and the way frozen mud tore at the bottom of a skirt. She knew Ruth Pike had begun setting aside extra coffee when the morning was cruel. She knew Miriam trusted her enough to argue with her, which was a different kind of respect from politeness. And she knew Samuel Pike had stopped watching her hands for danger and started watching them for answers. In March, the farm's old centrifugal pump failed. The pump was not supposed to matter that day. A thaw had loosened the upper ditch. Water should have moved by gravity, but a collapsed bank forced the crew to pull from a reserve cistern, and the pump belt snapped under strain. The replacement belt was in Twin Falls. The road was mud. The weather was turning again. If the reserve water did not move before dark, the early planting beds would crust over and crack. Pike cursed the pump. Miriam cursed the road. The guard cursed quietly because everyone else was cursing, and it seemed like the local language. Klara asked to see the belt. It was not a belt anymore. It was 3 pieces of old leather in defeat. She studied the pulley, then the shaft, then the broken belt. In Hamburg, before the war narrowed her life to forms and signals, her father had repaired printing presses. She had grown up handing him tools and watching him solve problems with what was actually in the room. A belt was a loop. A loop needed tension. Tension did not care whether the material had been sold for that purpose. She pointed to the harness room. Miriam understood first. "No," Pike said. Miriam said, "Maybe." They cut 2 worn harness straps, overlapped them, punched holes with an awl, stitched rawhide through the joins, soaked the leather, stretched it, tightened it, and set it on the pulley while the guards leaned in to spite themselves. The first time, it slipped off. The second time, it smoked. The third time, Klara adjusted the tension by the width of 2 fingers. The pump caught. Not water moved. Not beautifully. Not permanently. Enough. That became the story people told later, because it was easier to understand than the larger truth. A German prisoner fixed an American pump with harness leather. It sounded almost cheerful. But the real story was not the pump. The real story was what had to be true before she was allowed close enough to fix it. No chains. No automatic suspicion at the exact moment skill was needed. No rule that confused control with safety. No pride so brittle it could not receive help from the wrong hands. Everything useful had happened before the pump turned. The water was only the proof. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. At Camp Burley, the news arrived in pieces. First from the guards, then from the radio, then from the way the camp went quiet in places that had never been quiet. Some prisoners cheered because it was over. Some cried because home was a word with no building left inside it. Some said nothing at all. Klara stood at the wire fence and watched dust move along the road toward Pike Farm. She thought she would feel relief, like a door opening. Instead, she felt an entire life waiting on the other side of that door, and most of it was rubble. Repatriation would come, not immediately. Paper moved slower than victory. For 3 more months the women worked. By then, no one pretended the work was only labor. It was routine. It was identity. It was the thing that proved a person could still be useful after history had used her badly. Anna's child was born in June in the camp infirmary. Ruth Pike sent a blanket. Miriam said the baby looked like a furious potato and was asked never to help with compliments again. Lotta began teaching a farmhand to keep cellar records in columns instead of scraps. Greta refused to leave the dairy barn until she had written the wash sequence in English and German on a board. and Klara walked the ditch line as if the water had been entrusted to her personally, because it had. The last day at Pike Farm came in August. The truck arrived early. The women already knew. Ruth had packed food, though no regulation required it. Miriam stood by the machine shed with her arms folded so tightly it looked like she was holding herself in place. Samuel Pike brought out a wooden crate. Inside were the work gloves the women had used all season. Not new gloves. The old ones. The ones stretched by their fingers, darkened by mud, stiff at the seams, fitted now to the shape of their actual hands. He handed each pair back to the woman who had worn them. When he reached Klara, he gave her the gloves and a small paper notebook. Inside were ditch measurements, gate positions, pump notes, and the little sketches she had made when English failed her. On the first page, Samuel Pike had written one sentence in careful block letters. A field remembers the hands that saved it. Klara read it once, then again. The interpreter offered to translate. She shook her head. She understood enough. Before she climbed into the truck, Pike held out his hand. For a second, Klara did not know what to do with it. Then she took it. His hand was dry, rough, and warm. The same hand that had refused the irons. The same hand that had put the shovel back into hers when the gate froze. The same hand that had given her the notebook instead of a speech. He said, "No iron in my fields." This time he did not say it to the army. He said it to her. Klara returned to Germany before winter. Hamburg had been broken open by fire. The street where her parents had lived existed, but the building did not. The bakery was a wall. The school was a shell. The harbor smelled familiar and ruined. For months she could not decide which was crueler, that everything was different or that some things were the same. She found work first clearing rubble, then registering displaced families, then assisting a relief office that needed someone who could read forms, listen without rushing, and keep people from disappearing into the machinery of reconstruction. She was good at that work for reasons no certificate could explain. When a widow arrived with 3 children and no papers, Klara did not treat her as a file. When an old man shouted because his ration card had been lost twice, she heard fear before insult. When a girl no older than 17 refused to speak, Klara placed the bread directly into her hands, not on the table, not through someone else, into her hands. Years passed. The white scars on Klara's wrists faded until no one else would have noticed them. She still noticed. Sometimes, while reading a difficult letter, she touched the skin where the iron had been and remembered rough boards, cold water, and an Idaho farmer saying that a field could not be worked by people treated like objects. In 1967, a letter reached her from the United States. The envelope had traveled through too many offices. The handwriting was slow but steady. Samuel Pike was 84. He wrote that Miriam had taken over most of the farm. Ruth had died the year before. The west ditch still held if watched carefully. He asked whether Klara still had the notebook. She wrote back on 12 pages. She told him about Hamburg, about the relief office, about Anna, who had eventually found her husband alive in Bavaria, about Lotta's columns, about the way she still remembered the sound of the chain hitting the boards. Samuel wrote 4 more letters before he died. Miriam wrote the 5th. She said her father had kept a copy of the district evaluation in his desk, not because he cared about army praise, but because it proved something he had always believed and had only once needed to defend in public. Miriam copied his words in the final paragraph. Most men who ask for chains are not afraid of escape. They are afraid of the moment they might have to trust someone. Klara folded that letter and placed it inside the Pike notebook. She kept the gloves beside it. After her death, her nephew found them in a wooden box with her papers. He also found a photograph taken at Pike Farm in August 1945. Klara stood beside the west ditch, thinner than she should have been, mud on her skirt, her face turned slightly away from the camera because the Idaho sun was in her eyes. Behind her stood Samuel Pike, Miriam, Ruth, 2 guards, and 9 German women who had arrived in irons and left with work gloves. On the back of the photograph, in Samuel Pike's handwriting, were 5 words. Not a caption, not a moral, a rule. No iron in my fields. That was the whole story if you were willing to hear it. Not because one farmer ended a war, he did not. Not because every prisoner became noble, they did not. Not because decency removed danger from the world, it never has. But on a cold morning in 1944, one man looked at a rule that made sense to the people who wrote it, and nonsense to the people who had to live under it. He saw that the irons did not protect the field. They protected fear from being questioned. So he questioned it. Everything that mattered came after that. The water held, the harvest came in, the program survived. A woman who had been treated like a risk remembered how to become useful, and then spent 30 years making sure other broken people were not reduced to the worst thing that had happened to them. History is full of battles loud enough to shake the ground. This was quieter. A lock opened, a chain hit wood, a farmer handed back a shovel, and somewhere inside a prisoner who had promised she would not beg, something heavier than iron began to come loose. The field did not need chains. Neither did she.